take it to them where they are in the pew and have them hold it.
Good morning, friends. I am Evie Kennenwood from Syracuse Friends Meeting, and I want to just kind of give an introduction to how we see this morning unfolding. We're here to celebrate the life of Harry Hines Schwarzlander, and we'll begin. The order is in the front of your program. The first part will be the family tribute in song and verse and memories from the family. Following that, we will move into a more corporate remembrance where we will take turns speaking. I've been told that there's difficulty, or it's more important to hold the mic close and up for those who are on streaming to hear. We may be able to hear you fine, but the mic needs to be held this way for our sharing after. So that's important to remember. And then Hani will indicate when that time of sharing is done, and we will have close with Annie's song and refreshments following, and time to share memories in a more informal way. We meet here to remember and recognize and celebrate the life of Harry Schwarzlander, a longtime faithful attender of Syracuse Friends Meeting and the beloved husband of our dear member, Pat Carey Schwarzlander. It is a time to draw those who feel Harry's physical absence into the comfort and care of the loving Spirit, which is here for all of us. It is an occasion when we set aside temporary things, deeply feel the reality of our immortal life, and open to the presence of Spirit to bring us hope, comfort, and consolation. As that Spirit moves us when it becomes our turn to share, any one of us may feel led to share a message. Your words briefly spoken from the depths of your heart, a prayer, words of solace, a memory or a story how Harry touched you, are often meaningful and comforting to the rest of us. And yes, you can even burst into song. Even without speaking, by deeply and fully listening to each other, and by being present with one another, we share together in a united, loving, and sympathetic spirit. So we'll start with some silence where we settle in, and when the family feels moved, they'll begin their portion of their sharing.
Hi everyone, I'm Dan Schwarzlander. Just gonna adjust this a little bit. Here we go. Thank you for being here today to remember my dad. I'm a little bit shy, so bear with me. I thought I would just start by telling a story that was told to me that I remember only very, very vaguely by Bob Newman, who was one of my dad's closest friends. I was a student at Bob Newman's school from kindergarten through 4th grade called the Syracuse Institute for Enabling Education, SIEE. and it was really fun. One of the things that we get to do at SIEE every 6 months or so was Bob Newman would take us out to lunch, and that was a real treat. And he really wanted to get to know each kid, and he would interview us and ask us really interesting, open-ended questions. I remember really enjoying that. He told me this story of asking me who my hero was when I was around 7 or 8. And I said, my dad. And he asked why. And I said, well, he's so smart. You know, he can do anything. And he's going to fix the world. And Bob had met my dad, but he didn't really know him at all. But he said, it sounds like someone I'd really like to get to know and spend some time with. And he said that motivated him to seek out my dad, and that really began their friendship. That feeling of admiration for my dad and pride about who he was and how he spent his time and what was in his heart really persisted throughout my life. I don't really know how to summarize that, so I'm not going to try. I feel like growing up with my dad as my father, there was a lot that I took for granted. Being young, I just thought, that's how dads were. But over time, I really came to realize that I was really lucky and feel really lucky and came to realize that not everyone's dad was so present in their lives and so kind and even-tempered and so thoughtful, or was going to fix the world either. So I'd like to read a short piece from the yellow brochure, which was a ubiquitous piece of paper that was in our world as I was growing up, participating in New Environment Association activities and events. The New Environment Group is motivated by a hope rooted deep in the heart of each of its members that the way is still open for the development of a new society based on the loving interrelationship with humans, the earth, and more importantly, of humans with each other. The direction of world affairs as guided by the ethos of the developed nations deeply concerns us. Increasingly, the dominant systems of the modern world can be seen to be not only contrary to any real concern for life, all forms of life, but most distressingly, these systems can be seen to be actually destructive of life. They are systems turned in upon themselves, destroying and consuming that which they serve. The individual, the precious individual, the me, the you, is left feeling intimidated, overwhelmed, and helplessly small in the face of it all. The individual sees abuses and injustices, and he or she wants to suggest change, to create and work for improvement, but the systems roll on. But the individual is important. Each of us is perhaps the world's greatest resource. A sense of dissatisfaction, of powerlessness, but most beautifully of hope, motivates the New Environment Group to search for a new community. What I just read was expressed in such earnestness in 1974. Not only was my dad seeing the future, but he was thinking broadly about the systems that he called the psychophysical complex that really required community action to change. A powerful message that I think was core to his being was that of hope. Even with his X-ray vision into what the future was bringing, he maintained his faith in humanity and his hope for bringing about a better future. And I'm really trying to hold on to that right now. Thank you.
I think I'll lower it just a little. There we go. Hi, everyone. Oops. I think I'm unscrewing it. There we go. Thank you again for coming. I'm Schwarzlander, and I wrote something because I didn't trust myself to just improv on the spot. So, close by. My dad, he had a way of listening and then cocking his head and saying, "How about that?" He was always listening. He was always noticing the details, always being present without drawing attention to himself. He was humbly brilliant, never interjecting to announce the answer to a question, but thoughtfully explaining it when asked. When it came to math, he had the ability to break it down in a way that made sense and was accessible. He got me through my freshman statistics course at Oberlin College, tutoring me over the phone when you had to pay per minute for long distance. I know I'm dating myself. Sorry. And helped me ace my calculus class at SU. His office in Link Hall on the SU Quad for the many years he taught in the Department of Electrical Engineering felt like a second home to me, and I would often stop in for a visit and go get lunch with him in one of the cafeterias. He took me with him to visit family in Germany several times throughout my childhood, starting at a very young age, instilling my passion for travel and love of flying. We would play games on the airplane, but the one that comes to mind the most is Battleship, because all we needed was graph paper and a pencil, and we would create our own grids on the tiny squares, block in our ships, and then X out the squares as we were hit. Then we would eat the elaborate meals they served back in the 60s and 70s, all the while peering out the windows to watch the earth below or the clouds. We were always observing the countless details and learning, expanding our perspective of the world. My eyes are not cooperating, sorry. Whenever we were outside at night with a view of the sky, he was pointing out planets and constellations. His wealth of knowledge seemed endless to me. I could ask him anything, and he would always know the answer, but elaborate in his kind, thoughtful way that felt like he was pondering it anew in a way that never patronized or made you feel inadequate for not knowing. In this sense, he was the most inclusive, non-judgmental person I have ever known, and what made him so approachable and sought after as an educator. When I was around 12, we brought a huge aluminum canoe to take up to Lake Nineveh for our summer camping trips and put flower power stickers on it. My dad and I took Red Cross canoeing courses together, learning the paddle strokes, how to get in and out of a canoe without tipping and falling into the water, how to portage, and most important, what to do if you capsized, which included capsizing fully clothed and taking off our thick denim jeans, getting air into them, tying them around our necks as a makeshift life jacket, and then righting the canoe and getting it to shore, all in the chilly pre-summer water of Jamesville Reservoir. After that, we were the pros. I spent a lot of time with my dad the last 2 months of his life. We always listened to classical music and piano music, and he would almost whistle along, bobbing his head, his fingers tapping as if playing on the piano. His presence is still very much with me, and I walk into the Nottingham to visit my mom, and it feels like he is just on the other side of the wall in the next room, working at his desk with his endless list of things to do. He is about to call out hello, roll back his chair, and make his way into the living room to join us, about to say a gentle hello and say my name as only he could.
Read this enclosure that they made, very beautiful. They wrote the story, about his life, so you can read about it. And so there are people here from all aspects of my life and his life, including his student Shu Kai-Chin, people from the Nottingham, people I knew from, Sacred Dance and New Environment, and family. So the thing about things about my husband that were too important to me was that he always could try to find the best out of the most difficult things. When he was only 4 years old, his parents were Friedrich Schwarzlander. He was a forester in Bavaria, and his mother was a dancer in the opera at the Augsburg Opera Company. And they were not having a good relationship, and so they sent him away to a foster home many miles away in Bonn, and they were not, it wasn't anywhere where he could see them, and he was only 4.5 years old, so he decided that he wanted to look at something carefully there, so he studied the ants in the garden. He watched the ants, where they lived and how they walked and how they made their places, and he just made the best out of that. He just talked about living in Bonn and knowing all about ants, which I thought was great. And then he came back from Bonn. He was put in an orphanage, and he was learned to meet a lot of other children who were from broken homes, and he felt, that he could understand other children because he had the similar situation. And then he moved to Augsburg, where he was born, and lived in the Klauge House, which was a home for children who were from parents who were in difficult situations. And at the Klauge House, he learned about drawing, and how he learned about a lot about trains. He used to go out and stand on the bridge over the train station and watch the trains come. He knew every locomotive. He knew everyone, their names, and every track, what came on every track. So he made the best, of those kinds of things. So I thought that was amazing. And when he was living in Germany during the time of the war, he was born in 1931, so it was the rise of Hitler at that time and also the persecution of the Jews. And his mother was commanded to go to Munich to the Gestapo headquarters and to report there because she was going to go to concentration camp. She said to the people, the Gestapo, I can't go there, I have a son to take care of. And they pulled a folder out of the drawer, Harry said, and said, well, you can go to the camp because he has a father who can take care of him. So his mother went to Theresienstadt, which was the Nazis considered the the best camp that they had, because they had a orchestra, they had a choral group, they had lectures from the residents who were professors and scholars, and they said that would be the best camp, you know, where she could go. So he lived with his father and his aunt during the time, Tante Julia, Tante Bertha, and he was there during the bombings, and the family had dug underground a bomb shelter so that they could go in the bomb shelter when the Allied planes came and bombed. And so he always took some lamp with him, and his math problems that he wanted to work out, and whatever he could do to read or think about when they were in the dark, you know, under the earth during the bombing. And he never knew when they heard the explosions everywhere, but he said, we never knew when we came out what it would be like, whether everything would be destroyed or whether, you know, there would still be anything left. So that was a very difficult time for him. And then he was, because his mother was in Theresienstadt, it was not a camp where she was really tortured or hurt, and they didn't have the gas chambers there, but she was able to play the piano. And we have all these wonderful people in our family who play the piano now. But she played the piano, and she said that one time when she was leaving, one of the young German soldiers came and said to her, you know, I'm not supposed to talk to you because you're a prisoner, but I grew up in a family with a lot of music, and I really appreciate your piano. And it was very beautiful. It reminded me of home. So that was really very sweet. Yeah. So I don't know where I am in his life right now, but these are the kinds of things that he told me. I hope that Ricard, his brother, and his sister Marta, they both live in Germany. Ricard's married to Ursula. She's a sister for me. And we've been going back and forth to Germany ever since. I knew him since we married. We've been going back every couple of years, and he's always kept in good touch with the family because it's really meant a lot to him that he had such a good family in Germany. And let's see. And then I met him in Boston. We both auditioned for the Handel and Haydn Oratorio Society. I never thought I'd get in. I knew he would get in. I didn't know him then already, but because he's a tenor. So we both auditioned the same night. We didn't know each other, and I got in, and he got in, and we met afterwards in the hall, and got talking with friends, and from then we did music together most every week. We went to his homework because he had a piano. When he first got an apartment, first thing he bought was a bed. The second thing he bought was a piano. I showed you where his preferences were. So after we were living in Boston, he was trying to decide whether he would go to get a job in New Hampshire with a company or go to graduate school. So he decided to go to graduate school. So we moved to Indiana, where he went to Purdue for 4 years and got his PhD. And that was in the place where Hani and Eric were born. And we lived in Indiana, and that was a very special and very busy time for us. Yeah. And after he finished the PhD there, he was offered a job at Syracuse University teaching in the Department of Electrical Engineering. And so he accepted that, and we moved here, and we've been here ever since. And Hani and Eric were really little when we came here, but Dan was born after we came here, so he was the youngest one to round out our family. Yeah. So we're very, Harry Heinz, I called him Heinz. The reason he was called Heinz was when he came to the United States, he came through immigration, and when they read his name was Heinz, the man said to him, "What is your name?" He said, "Heinz Schwarzlander." He said, "Heinz, that's the name of a company that makes ketchup." It's not a name. And so the man there said, there are other names you could choose. There's Harold, there's Harvey, there's Hugh, there's Harry, you know. So he said, all right, I'm going to be Harry. So that's how he got his name Harry, even though all of us who knew him well, we still called him Heinz. Yeah. So, what else? Let's see. I just feel that he made the best out of every situation, whether it was studying ants or learning to draw or studying math problems in the bomb shelter that they lived in during the Allied raids there. And when he was, during the war, all the children were evacuated down to southern Germany and northern Italy to go to school. They lived in a Gasthaus, an inn, and had their school there. And he had a lot of good times here, made friends, and they were outside a lot because they did lots of walks. And it was still the time of bombing, and he would say, we saw the silver bullets flying over us. We didn't know where they were going to drop their bombs, but we all hoped they wouldn't drop on us. So, and that was the experience of other people who, had lived at that time also. Oh, where am I? Anyway, so there we are in here, Syracuse. We had our first child was Eric, and Eric was born with Down syndrome, and I felt really very badly for Heinz because he had so many difficult things happen in his life. I thought he didn't need to have another difficult thing happen in his life, but luckily I'd had very good experience with people with Down syndrome. I had worked in a Rudolf Steiner home where there were many people with Down syndrome, and as a nurse I had also worked at a state school and volunteered to work with people who are who are retarded, and there were a lot of Down syndrome. So I had a lot of knowledge of and experience of people with Down syndrome. So for me it was a shock, but anyway, I felt like we could manage it. And he just said, when it was time to go home from the hospital, he said, we just take our baby and we go home and we love him. And so we did. So that was the way he was. He always found the good things and tried to make the best out of everything. He was a wonderful husband. He was always kind and thoughtful. He always had the larger view of things. He worked in systems, so he saw the smaller things, the problems that need to be worked out, but he always was able to see the wider things. And his vision for a world of peace and cooperation, the New Environment Association that he had and started in the 70s was just his main focus for his life, even though he taught engineering at the university. And it's so nice to have Shu Kai here. He was one of his students at the university who teaches the same thing he used to teach, right? Yeah. So the new environment really became his focus, as well as we spent a tremendous amount of time trying to get the best situations for our son with Down syndrome, because at that time we were told that when Eric was born, the doctor told us he would only be like a vegetable. He'd only maybe he'd never learn to do anything, and that we should put him in an institution, which was what we didn't do. But we had a lot of things all through Eric's life that we worked on to make sure that Eric got the kind of help, education that he needed, and including having to go away to Massachusetts to school for a couple of years because the Syracuse system wouldn't provide any kind of education for him, but the state required that all children be educated. So we worked on a lot of things together, and he worked on a lot of things in his own way. He was very good at playing the piano. He played the piano almost every night, which was just beautiful. And it reminded him, I think his mother was a very good pianist. She loved Chopin. She played a lot of Chopin. And so I think that was a wonderful thing that he had learned from his mother, and he wanted to do and kept going for his whole life, being interested in music. So I think he lived very fully up to the time that he passed. I was with him the day that he died, and Hani and David were with him the minute he died. So I felt like he knew that he was surrounded by love, and he knew that he was loved. So thank you all for coming, and I know all of you have known either him or me in certain ways, and that you also would know more about him because of what was written here and what our family's been able to tell about him. Thank you all for being. Au revoir. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Else of our family who'd like to say anything, and David's there. And then after that, anybody else who wants to share anything, we'll so welcome you to say anything.
Hi, everyone. Is it working? Get closer to it, yes. This is a story of my life the last 34 years. I get to attempt to follow Hani and my mother-in-law. So be it. I'm David Beach. Can everybody hear me? I see. I met Harry most likely when I was a baby, an infant really. And my grandparents lived right next to the Schwarzlanders on Fenway Drive. So we knew the families, and I knew his name my entire life. But my first memory of Harry was not until the fall of 1992. I was fresh out of undergrad with a degree I knew would lead nowhere. I lacked any world experiences to think of. I was looking for work. If I had future prospects at the time, I wasn't aware of them. So here I was, 22 years old, with not much to offer, meeting Dr. Harry Schwarzlander, PhD, tenured professor at Syracuse University. I heard he was a brilliant mind, and also that he had survived Nazi Germany during the 40s, and at 15, along with his Jewish mother, he left his homeland in Germany after the war and started a new life for himself in New York City, where he learned a new language, a new culture, a new way of life. He had been around the block. It was also known to me that he was a Renaissance man, one who could successfully lead a group up and down a mountain peak. He could play beautiful Mozart and Beethoven on the piano, even sing in a chorale. His artistic talents were so great, he considered at one time a career in art, possibly photography or graphic design, or take your pick, until in the end, engineering and academia won out. As a professor, I heard from Hani that he taught high-level calculus in a way that students actually learned the underlying principles, not just how to use formulas mechanically. He was a deep thinker and an equally patient, effective teacher. He was not only a Renaissance man, but he was a very intelligent Renaissance man. Harry also happened to be the father of the girl I was crazy about and determined to see more of. Leading up to the formal meet the parents, which, by the way, was on his turf in his house on Fenway, not my grandmother's, I suspect that I had much to be insecure and nervous about. The truth is, I don't recall the exact circumstances of the day. I don't remember where we were in the house or of the greeting, or where, if it was paired with lunch, or the specific questions asked. Like so many memories of Harry, the actions of the moment or precise words spoken were always secondary. The what, the where, the why regarding Harry are never the memories that stand out for me. It was always the how. I've heard that when giving a speech, particularly at a memorial like this, it's best to share stories that people can relate to, ones that make people laugh or cry, or ideally both. I've read that providing a laundry list of personal attributes or characteristics should be avoided, but the fact is my best memories of Harry are not of him climbing Blueberry Mountain at the age of 80, that's true, or watching him effortlessly teach my boys, young boys at the time, piano, math, German, and a lot more. Chess, right, Carl? And he did it with the patience and the love that only a loving grandparent like Harry and true teacher could provide. But my favorite memories aren't those, even on the more humorous side, like when I first learned at Lake Nineveh about the existence of the weather box. I don't know if anybody knows what the weather box is, but it has powerful gospel. And it should be practiced fully, without hesitation, or else suffer the consequences. That's for you, honey. Although fond, my favorite memories are not bonding with Harry, stacking wood at Fenway or on the Vermont land, to which Harry brought a measured precision and artistry that I was and still am today literally incapable of processing. As hard as I watched Harry stack wood from a safe distance, I just couldn't grasp the perfection of the final product nor replicate it. He was a perfectionist. I was not. Frankly, my favorite memories of Harry I should have had the tissues, not you, honey. No, it's okay. My favorite memories of Harry are just of him, his being, his essence as a human being. My favorite memories of Harry really are how he behaved and how he treated those around him. I don't ever recall a time in which he was rude or signaling or raising his voice to be heard over another's. On the contrary, he was incredibly kind and welcoming and thoughtful to anyone and to any varied perspective. He certainly had opinions. Of course, he was knowledgeable enough to have very good opinions, but I never once saw him push those opinions on anyone or come across as judgmental or off-putting. I never heard him say an ill word about anyone, nor make a joke, nor even a snarky look at someone else's expense, ever. This is remarkable, especially when you consider that he did indeed have a sense of humor and he had a playful side. I'm not suggesting that we should all be pure of spirit in this regard, as this would be an impossible goal. At least for me, it's impossible. But he did set a standard and a target for how one should behave that I respect. Seeing how he behaved as a person are my most cherished memories of Harry. When I think of Harry, I also think about his authenticity. He was the opposite of a false person. He was exactly what he appeared to be. He was kind, he was caring, thoughtful, respectful, one who loved the world and all things within it, and his actions expressed his love in all that he did throughout his life. He was truly virtuous. So on that fall day of 1992, he made me feel comfortable and important, more so than others might claim I deserved. Harry was nothing but loving and welcoming that day and all the following years thereafter. It's been an absolute blessing to me that my life crossed paths with Harry for so many reasons, and I'm just so thankful that a person like that existed, and I'm sure that his positive impact will continue to be expressed and felt in those that he so gracefully touched.
Back. Thanks, everyone. I now have the pleasure of reading a message that my Aunt Peggy, my mom's sister, shared. She is, I believe, at home in Connecticut right now and maybe seeing us on our live stream. live stream. And she sent a message that I'll read. I met Heinz for the first time when I was about 13 or 14 years old, the perfect age for not paying much attention to the world of adults. But even then, he was memorable for his warmth and kindness. When he and Pat were to be married, they arrived at our home in Ballackinwood, bringing his mother, Alice, and Walter, to whom she was married, to stay with us. I had been told in advance to remember that Alice, a survivor of the Nazi persecution of the Jews in Germany, would say thank you very often, and I should not be surprised at the steady expression of gratefulness for just about anything you did or said. For several years afterwards, I exchanged letters with Alice, hers always filled with appreciation for the weather, safe travel, the fruit on the table, anything I wrote, the quality of the paper, all of those innumerable blessings. Heinz was often away from Alice during his childhood, but the appreciation she proffered to the world reappeared in the generosity and gratitude he exemplified throughout his life. Some of my favorite moments with Heinz were at Lake Nineveh, after a usually bracing swim when we returned to the beach for our towels and hats. He clearly delighted in the water, the beauty of the lake with Tiny Mountain in the distance, and probably the anticipation of a family dinner and an evening either by the campfire or on the deck. It was a time to talk or not talk, depending on what was top of mind, which could be the new Environment Association, music, math, the water quality in the lake, or the doings of children and grandchildren, or the simple loveliness of the day. There was time at Nineveh for a little math, or maybe some German lessons with the grandchildren, as well as hiking. I came to appreciate Heinz as a Renaissance person who could draw wonderfully, play the piano, sing, do and teach calculus, reflect and tussle with the roots of how poorly we care for the earth and one another, and then try to imagine how those relationships could be repaired. His breadth of interests and the multiplicity of imaginative and intellectual gifts were formidable, and he wore it all lightly. That he and Pat encountered one another while singing in Boston was a wonderful thing for both of them. Sharing the same values and aspirations, she championed his efforts, even when, given the prescience and depth of his vision and imagination, the outcomes were not promising. She was the recipient of his unswerving affection and appreciation for her practicality, insight, and steady spiritual companionship as they navigated uncertainty, joy, and loss. The New Environment Bulletin arrived faithfully at our house for many years, and these missives are replete with Heinz's wide-ranging thinking about how best to incorporate the stars, the water, the land, the many creatures and peoples of the earth into a harmonious whole, and how to mend the considerable rents in the fabric of our social and environmental lives. He thought about these things earlier and in greater depth than most of us. These offerings were in many ways not timely. It's only in very recent years that most of us have had the ears to hear and the capacity to recognize the complexity and urgency of what he understood many decades ago. We all will miss Heinz, his kindness and gentle sense of humor that was often most evident in his eyes. But those of you who were his companions on an almost daily basis for the last several years, and sharing meals, playing music solo or in company, reading, or taking those inevitable trips to this or that doctor's office will miss him keenly. Heinz was a marvelous and sturdy presence, and he left us with an open invitation to keep learning about the gifts of the natural world and imagining how to mend what is amiss in our lives, along with a deep well of generosity and gratitude that we can and should draw from to do that. May his memory be for a blessing. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Casey Beach, one of Opa's grandsons. I remember very well every single week after school for a lot of my childhood getting picked up by Gigi after school and going to Opa and Gigi's house for the evening. Gigi would first take me shopping, usually into the thrift store, but then after that we would go, and the first thing I would do when I got there is I would run upstairs to Opa's study, where I would ask him to come down and play some board game or something with me, and although I'm sure he had a lot to do, he always said yes. And one of these times I remember playing Winnie the Pooh with him, which is not a game, but we both seemed to understand the point of the game then. I don't know the point now, but as an 8-year-old with a big imagination, he had just as big an imagination as I, and he played the game better than I could. So, and then we would eat, and then I would ask to be excused, and I would go play something at the piano. And had I practiced a lot that week, I never knew it because he was always very quiet, but he would come and stand behind me and watch me play. And it wasn't always, but sometimes he would, and then he would tell me I played very nicely, and I was always very happy when he would do that. So, yes.
I didn't write anything as eloquently out, so bear with me here. But I'm Carl. I'm the oldest grandchild of Opa, Harry Schwarzlander. And I feel very fortunate that I was born when I was, because I got to spend all of my formative years spending a lot of time with Opa, which was really a blessing for me. One of the things that he really shared with me, which I'm really grateful for, is his love for music. He taught me how to play my first song on the piano, which was really great. I'll play it later. It was the Merry Farmer. As I think my dad mentioned, he was a bit of a perfectionist, and so we practiced that quite a bit. But there's definitely something to be said about the value of working hard and trying to perfect something, which he definitely understood. And all through my childhood, he was always at my music recitals, and he always made sure, whenever I told him that I was playing a new song, he would say, "It's not a song, it's a piece." You're playing a new piece, so I'll play some pieces later. So that was very fortunate for me. He also helped financially support my music lessons, taking cello from the age of 5 and piano starting at the age of 9. And I'm very grateful for that. And also some of my most fond childhood memories were going up to some land in Vermont, which he and Gigi bought back in the 60s, I believe. And He was a bit of an outdoorsman, so it was fun to just sort of follow him around. I never really remember working particularly hard, but he would be out scything and I would be running around and going down to the lake, and he was always, I think he's really good with kids, and he was always, he was always up to play a game, or as Casey said, imagine something creative and get us excited. He helped me with my math classes also as well. We played chess. But probably what I'm most grateful for in having known him was not only the impact that he had on me directly, but also on my own mom, and also seeing that on Dan as well. He was a great father, and he passed a lot of really positive attributes down to his own children, which then have been passed down to us. So he really had a big impact, and he will be remembered fondly.
Yes, you have to come down to the atmosphere where most of us live. My name is Sharon Sassaman. When I lived in Syracuse, I was Sharon Breadlaw, and Pat and Harry were my family. And the one thing that I really loved about Harry, he had a sublime gentleness about him. It was a soothing peace, and it felt so nice to be in his presence. You just kind of took a sigh of relief, because you knew, as you said, honey, he was the most non-judgmental person I have ever met. And it was really soothing to be around him. I'll tell a story. I wasn't intending to, but I will. One of the things that you might not know about Harry was that he became a dancer. Not as good as his daughter or his mother, but for a while, we had the New Environment Association would get together and we would dance. I did improvisational dance in the style of Isadora Duncan, and I would bring my silks and my music, and we would all dance, and Harry would join right in. And he would take the music into his body to express it. And I remember one time we were doing a theme of water for the environment, and there was a lot of blue silks and umbrellas and different props. I don't know if you remember that, Pat. But I had gotten the inner message before the class to use the music of the Moldau. And when I listened to it, the first part would have been wonderful. It was really flowy and perfect for water. But then it goes into this kind of very strong, powerful, for powerful movement. And I thought, well, it doesn't really keep the water motif. So I used another piece of music, I can't remember what. And afterwards, he came up to me and he said, you know, you could have played the Moldau. And so, Harry, to this day, I regret not playing the Moldau for you. I'm sorry. But, you know, we've talked a lot about the pressures and the difficulties that his life started out with. And sometimes under pressure, coal turns to diamonds. And it did with Harry. And one of the diamonds he gave us was his vision. He was a visionary. He was a true visionary. And visionaries are often very quiet, but their vision speaks loudly, and his vision spoke to us loudly. He envisioned the possibility of a more perfect world, an environment where people could live in community and support each other, where they could respect and live in harmony with Mother Nature, and where dialogue and compromise could be the foundations for the evolution of community, where the integrity of the mind and the spirit can develop and express itself according to each individual's true nature. He gave his vision to us. He gave it to his students, he gave it to his children, he gave it to his grandchildren, he gave it to the world in everything that he wrote and everything that he worked for the New Environment Association. What more could we do that would be a better honor for Harry than to carry on his vision, to embody it in our daily lives? That is how I hope to honor him, so that his vision can really be manifested in the world. There was another dance that I remember. And Harry, I hope it's okay I share this. It was a dance of determination, where the first dancer comes out with a flag and, declares the vision. And then that dancer falls, and another dancer comes in and grabs the flag before it can hit the floor. And then she or he dances for a while and also falls, and another dancer comes in and grabs the flag before it can hit the ground. And this happens over and over and over again. And we did it as a group. And Harry came in and he grabbed the flag before it could hit the ground from the dancer in front before him. And as he went down, the next dancer came and took the flag from him. And I looked over, and Harry was lying on the floor among the other dancers who had already fallen. And he was crying. He had tears in his eyes. Please, Harry has given the flag to us. Don't let it hit the ground.
Harry, as Sharon said, was a visionary. He was a true gentleman. What came off his lips was kind, was generous, was patient. He always thought of others first. The tone of his voice was so soothing, but very, very serious. I first got to know Harry in the mid-1970s when he was starting the New Environment Association. And a whole group of people, including I, were meeting at the Quaker Meeting House on Euclid, which became a home away from home for him, a place where he kept an extra library. And I remember, I won't call it a class, a workshop that he taught about the changes that came about with the invention of the automobile. This is just one workshop, one afternoon, one evening, whatever. And we began to realize, oh my gosh, how the world changed with the advent of cars, roads, paving. And he created an environment in his teaching where he was not teaching us. He was helping us to unfold in understanding, so that the group of people were making contributions. And there would be little spreadsheets or, pieces of paper with drawings on them, Venn diagrams. But I came away with a whole different way of looking at the environment and our impact on it, with just the constellation of changes that have occurred in our lifetime in the past 250 years of this country, for example. So he was a great teacher, but he was also a great role model. I also knew him at that time because he helped found the first recycling program in Syracuse. He wasn't just a visionary, he was an activist. He set the tone for what happened in our entire country. He had that capability. I don't know what it was about him. And he was like a magnet for other people in that era who were, in that protest period, after Vietnam, it was the hippie era. And we all had, I won't say I didn't create it because I tagged along, but we had a garden out at Delphi, out past Jamesville going down towards Labrador. And there was a big barn, and there was a chicken coop, and there were ponds to swim in, and a stream behind. But they created a whole field of, like a farm, which was like a community farm. Now, what Sharon alluded to was, his ideas about community. And he had a vision, and I hope that it comes about eventually on this planet. But he had an idea that in the New Environment Association, that people would be able to live in community, and they were looking for land, they were going to live together, and they were going to live out that model. And I would say in his late 80s, early 90s, he began to say that he felt his life had been a failure. Maybe not his whole life, but basically this vision had not happened. It had not materialized. They had not been able to find the land. They had the money. People had drifted off, and people got older. Well, he was in his 90s by then, or early 90s anyway. And some people had died, some people had drifted and lost the vision, and some had carried the vision elsewhere. And I remember sitting repeatedly having a meal or in some kind of meeting like the healing meditation and saying, Harry, you have been a success because every life that you have touched, everyone that you taught back in the 1970s, and for what, 45, 50 years of New Environment Association work, you have touched these lives and they have scattered like seeds across the world, and you don't know what they're doing. But I said, I'm only one example. I became so concerned about the environment and not just the environment being out there, you know, the inner environment, the outer environment, nature. And it changed my life and everything that I did in addition to my career, the passion. And I decided, after I had lived in Michigan for 29 years, to move back to Syracuse. One of the biggest reasons was so that I could once again become a part of the New Environment Association. And unfortunately, he was getting older. People were dwindling. We had a class on sustainability. Imagine a man in his late 80s having this idea. Charlotte was there, she sang. We met for, I don't know, maybe 8-10 weeks, and followed with a book, a program, a structure, and unfortunately, that was, I think, the last meeting. And then COVID happened. And then after that, he was isolated, and after that, it was go to the Nottingham. I'm going to say his life was a total success. And his impact is out there in every person whose life he touched at any point in his life, because it's all about the environment. The interpersonal environment, the natural environment. I have more respect for Harry than almost any other man. I haven't known a man of such greatness until I came to know him. To be in his presence because of his humility. He never bragged. He never tried to show off. He never, you were always felt like he was in the background guiding. So, I don't know where his soul is now. Wherever he is, I want him to hear, Harry, your life was a success, and the New Environment Association was a success because it lives on in all of us.
Hi, I'm Melissa. I'm Daniel's partner, and my kiddos are the younger end of the grandchildren. I wasn't sure I was going to speak today, but I wanted to share a thought that had come to me listening to everyone, which was I, like a lot of people have expressed, experienced Heinz's just natural warmth and welcoming and acceptance. Everyone keeps talking about how free of judgment he was, and he really carried that just so naturally. And he also, as I think other people have said, had this way of being very aware of small things in the world. He was very observant, and he didn't project that all the time, but anytime something, you would just find out that he'd actually noticed everything that had happened, that he was in the room. It seemed like maybe he was reading a book, but actually, if the conversation came up, he would say, oh, I noticed that they were really thinking about this and that this happened. And I think it lent a flavor of being seen to being with him all the time, that even if he wasn't talking to you directly, he was just very deeply aware. And there was an interesting thing that happened for me where, you know, after I already knew Heinz a little bit, I went into teaching preschool, and I worked with young children for many, many years. And in those early years, I was being mentored and learning how to do some of that close observation, how to be aware while wiping the snack table and doing everything else of small things that were going on, and to take those things in without judgment, without evaluation, so that you could take them in neutrally and actually think about what was happening. I didn't really fully make the connection until I had my own children who didn't get to see Heinz as much as the kids who lived in Syracuse, but when they were young, Pat and Heinz would come out every year to San Francisco, and we would come here every year. And it was so often when they were young that he would just, I wish I had a perfect example, but he would just say something at an hour later about what they had been playing or what they seemed to focus on. And it was just so insightful. And I thought, oh, he already knew and was living this thing that I had to learn and practice, that I loved learning and practicing, but it came so naturally to him. And as a new parent, I loved that he saw my children so closely. And the one funny thing I remember is when my younger one, Robin, was a toddler and just at this stage where she was very happy as long as her people were around, and so then she would just kind of do her own thing and come and go and just seem like a busy little person. And he just looked at her coming and going while we were at the dinner table one day, and she was very purposeful with very different things that she was doing and bringing in and out, and he said, "She's such a character." And it just felt like it was, I remember it because it was a little more of an interpretation than he often did. It was often just noticing, but it was so spot on for who she was in that moment. And it just was another way that I think he made me feel that he was seeing us all.
I'm Shukai Chen. I'm one of Harry's students. And Pat, thank you very much for having dinner with me, Linda, and my mother at the Nottingham Often. And so some of this you've heard before, but I'll try to package it up in summary form. When you called to tell me of Harry's passing, I was at Plymouth Church getting ready. I'm in the choir there. And for those of us who are now emeritus and have a chance to look back on our lives and be thankful, it struck me, I think many of you can identify that when I say that for me it's with gladness, but also with great sadness that so many of my North Stars have faded or have passed on. And as I reflected, I realized that Harry was, I think, the last electrical engineering and computer engineering professor that taught me personally as an undergraduate. Now, as you alluded to, I had the privilege of being an undergraduate in his class, and when I was at General Electric doing that, I was a graduate student in his detection and estimation class and the stochastic processes class. And then after that, was fortunate to join the department and become colleagues for 38 years. And, as I reflect on, and I think somebody said it very well, Harry planted seeds, and seeds take all different times to germinate and all different times to mature. And so what I wanted to reflect on very quickly, and I apologize, I wasn't planning to speak, but I just jotted down some notes, is that Harry, North Stars you use to guide and know where you are and where you should go. And so he did lead by example. And so, yes, I am, like Harry, but not as good as Harry, a systems engineer. And systems engineering is very, very rigorous. There's a lot of math, but that math is the easiest part of systems engineering. And what we call hard means that there is a hard, well-respected and well-accepted definition of what needs to be solved. The most difficult parts of system engineering is what's called soft. And to the unenlightened and uninformed, they equate soft with easy. But soft is any problem that involves human beings and human judgment and what's good enough. And you get, and that there is no universal definition there. And so as I reflected throughout, even before I even knew any of these definitions from a scholarly basis, Harry was already transmitting this knowledge to his undergraduates. It is not either or, it is both and. You know, I can have the best intentions to go to New York City from Syracuse, but if I get on 81 North, I'm going to have a problem. And so you need both. You need the precision and accuracy as well as the human values. And so often I see it's one or the other, but not both. But Harry had both, and he practiced it. He clearly was the same person with his family that he was with his students. In systems engineering and in other fields, we have a saying that there is no substitute for knowing what you're doing. And it is amazing to go through life seeing how many people will try to take every other path except the one that ultimately involves hard work and competence. And I came to that conclusion by watching Harry, Professor Schwarzlander, as we knew him, in class, and he had a reputation that you could ask him any question and he would come up with the answer. And those of you who have been in front of a class know that 10 seconds is a long time. I've clocked Harry. He would take no problem with, you'd ask him a question, a deep mathematical question, he'd stand there, look down, and take a full minute or more, and then calmly turn around and write the answer on the board. Again, those of you who've been in front of a class teaching rigorous subjects, that reflects true knowledge and capability. There is also with me, in systems engineering and in general, credibility is everything. Because if you don't have credibility, then, what comes out of your mouth is just hot air. And sometimes people overvalue what they say, and are not humble. And what I observed in Harry was that he routinely would be, if he said anything, would be one of the last people to speak. But isn't it funny how the last person who speaks often has the most to say and uses the fewest words while saying it? And so another thing in systems engineering and in the fields that I've learned, the part of the advice that we've been given, and I've passed on to my students, is that you look for people who speak least, because oftentimes they know the most. And that was Harry. And I will say that, I had the privilege of knowing him and some of his math professionally. And then Pat, I'm not sure I told you this. I think it may have been the last conversation I had with Harry after our dinners, and we were walking out. And my area is mission assurance and systems engineering, system security engineering, and the mathematical logic behind it. And I won't go into the details, but what I told Harry was, and I discussed it, it was a combination of soft systems engineering and systems theoretic process analysis for security and certified security by design, all these acronyms. But the very genesis I could trace back to his work at Syracuse when I was an undergraduate in the mid-70s, early to mid-70s, on general systems theory, which some of you have alluded to in the group that he formed, because when he shared that with me as a student, it was the goal was to apply general systems theory to solve human problems. And that was, and what I was saying to him at the end, not realizing how few days were ahead, but I wanted to make sure that Harry knew that he was the genesis of really the professional focus of my life, and that I would always be thankful to him. And there was never anything I could do, and I fully realized that how could I ever pay him back, but that we could only pay it forward. And so I want to thank you, Pat, for having the many opportunities to be with you and Harry when it's been an unexpected and undeserved gift. And so thank you very much.
I'm Catherine Hughes, and thanks. And Harry was my husband Bob Newman's best friend, and the friendship started after lunch with Dan. And Harry and Bob had lunch every week that they were both in town for 50 or more years. And they both had such an unshakable vision of a better world, which I stood in awe of how, in the face of so much, both into their 90s still believed that we could have a different world. And I was always so grateful that they had each other and that unshakable belief together, and how sustaining that must have been for both of them. And Bob, my husband, died 7 years ago, and I often, over the last 7 years, thought about what a loss that must have been for Harry. And just everybody knows what a lovely person Harry was, and I love the picture on the front of the programme. It is just the essence of Harry.
I'm going to read something that Hank Stone sent in because he couldn't be with us today. Gosh, I should get reading glasses one of these days. Harry Schwarzlander was an exceptionally good man. I heard of Harry's New Environment Association while pursuing world peace in Rochester, New York, about 50 years ago. Went to visit him and learned about his group, his CSA, the Community Supported Agriculture, and ambitions to buy land to live together as neighbors in a demonstration of the new environment understandings. Harry had it figured out already, but was miles ahead of our society. Harry and Pat invited me to participate in an annual NEA weekend retreat at Vanderkamp, New York. I loved the event and the people, and came when I could. I offered a ride to the late Roland Micklem, who lived on my way from Rochester, a delightful guy among the beautiful people who came to the retreat. One topic we discussed was Mr. Masaru Emoto's book, The Hidden Messages in Water. We exercised his thinking by labeling empty wine bottles with the words love, peace, joy, health, kindness, gratitude, hope, and forgiveness. We filled the bottles with tap water, walking them out on a dock into the pond nearby, took turns praying our intentions into each bottle according to its label, and then poured the blessed water into the pond, expressing our intention that each blessing should radiate outward, go into the air, and circle the world. On one occasion of doing this, we appeared to some authority figures who happened by to be poisoning the pond. Harry was able to satisfy the gentleman that we were not terrorists. Harry struggled with the difficulty of creating the new environment in the middle of this old environment, but he always modeled right living and was an inspiration to those whose lives he touched. That was from Hank Stone. Thank you, Hank. If there's no one else who would like to share, I think we're ready to move on to Annie's. Okay, come on up.
Good morning. I'm Brad. I'm a tuba player, or I was before I retired. I was talking with Harry, it must have been 20-some years ago. He was asking me how I came to Syracuse, and I said they had given me the first tuba scholarship that Syracuse gave back in 1953. And he said, what'd you work on? And I said, well, one of the things I worked on was the cello concerto by Brahms, number 1. And he said, I love that concerto. He said, do you have the music? I said, yes. I said, do you play cello? He said, no. He says, I play piano. I didn't know that. Harry and I spent 2 sessions, 2 hours apiece, working on that. And he was a really good pianist. And the only reason we stopped working on it was that he called me one day and he said, Brad, he said, the hands don't work anymore as well. And he said, I really don't think that I'll be able to continue the work. And I felt so bad, but he was such a perfectionist. But he was a really good pianist. I can testify that. And I don't know if I was able to turn Daniel into a guitar player, but we spent a few hours there during a couple of years while he was working on that. Thank you.
So if you would like to all turn to the last page in your program, there should be a copy of Annie's song. Do you want to? Oh, I'll let you.
Good morning. I'm Charlotte Haas. I just wanted to say, in small words, after all this beautiful sharing, that Harry had a momentous effect upon my life. His way of being, primarily his vision, his appreciation for life, but for all people that he met, and just seeing the very best in people. he brought many ideas to me and opened my broadened my horizons. But I was also lucky to sing with him, and I loved his tenor voice. And as a way of honoring Pat and Harry and their love for one another, I'll sing the first verse of Annie's song, but then I'd like everyone to join in on the second and third verses. And you can hear, even though we're using the microphones, and we won't have microphones out here, this acoustic space is wonderful for singing, so give it your all.
That was lovely. Thank you, everyone. We're going to shift into the atrium area for a bit of a reception, so please join us for some conversation and some yummy food. And we'll have a little bit of music by Carl and Casey and Jesse Beach as we move out there. Thank you again for coming.